This is the Dreadful Podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're watching Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, Episode 6, How It Is with Brothers.
You know how this works.
How it works is I give you 2 straight arrows first shot because that's the kind of world I wish we lived in. And then, like countless well-meaning precinct captains before me, I give in to reality.
Murphy's drunk in reality.
How it works is you find me a patsy to take the Hazlitt rap like I told you to do, and Riley never gets killed, and that poor dumb kid never winds up in the cooler in the first place. But you didn't do that, did you? So now we got another problem. It just has to get solved one way or another because that's just how it works.
Fine, we'll solve it.
Welcome back, fellow Penny Faithful. This is TV Podcast Industries. We're here to talk about Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, Episode 6, How It Is with Brothers. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow Dreadfuls. I'm one of your other hosts, John.
And rounding out this trio, I'm Chris.
How you doing, guys? Nice to have you back.
Yeah. It's a time in the world. It really is.
Yes, it feels weird that we're covering something that has a lot of racism built into the dynamics of the society of 1930s, late 1930s LA, and we have what's happening on our TV screens once we turn off City of Angels and we turn on the news, and we have, I suppose, what happens when you don't address it, really. It's a little strange, I think for me, certainly, at least to see what's happening in America, for sure.
Oh, definitely. You know, we've dealt with challenging shows before. I think a big example of that would be Watchmen, would be quite a challenging show that we've covered before. I think just the timing of this one happening on a week of, 6 days, really, where there's so much going on in the US, very much related to the concepts that are in the show. Like, I think John Logan mentioned this show as a reflection of what's going on in society in 2019 when he wrote the show. But, you know, there couldn't be a more relevant piece of entertainment on television, I suppose, this weekend than Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, I think.
Yeah, and I think just the opening of our podcast with the conversation held by Captain Vanderhoff, I think it's really pertinent, this idea of I suppose it's difficult enough to say, but how police maybe have always looked for that patsy, and the racism that can underpin it, or the bias in people, even if they don't mean to be racist.
Yeah, it's tough. We are not American. We have American friends. We have family in America. Yeah. We are 3 Caucasian men, from a race perspective, and it is sometimes. I don't mean this. I can't speak for you two, so I will speak for myself. I don't mean this as a platitude. I don't mean this as anything. I am watching. I have been in contact with a lot of my friends and just been constantly checking in because this is so close, and it is also coming at a time where the world is, and from an emotional perspective, the world is burning already from Corona. We have been locked indoors, emotions or tensions are high, and it gets worse. But from my own personal perspective, and again, I believe I speak for the 3 of us, we are completely against racism. We are 100% for inclusion. We believe and stand with every Black American person around the world, employee of the Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, of every podcast we listen to or TV show we've covered, every film, the storytellers, the writers, the art directors, the costume, anyone, and to be fair, even the whole entire Black community. We are there. We will unite and listen to you and speak out when we can and when the opportunity arises. We are 3 podcasters from Ireland, and it's not about a platform or a soapbox to, for us to give our views. This is just, the world is on fire from a medical perspective and now from a emotional, partnership and relationship perspective.
And I really hope in the same way that we're seeing so much footage from the US of what's been going on the last 6 days of everything that's led to the riots, everything that's led to the protests that's been going on. I really do hope that what's been done around the world, a lot of marches in solidarity that happened in Ireland are happening in New Zealand, a lot of other countries around the world who are very supportive of everybody that's affected by this in America. You know, the only message we can really say is just stay safe. You know, that's what it's all about.
That's the biggest one. And if you do need to go out and protest and show your solidarity, please wear a mask.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just remember that Corona is still out there. It is still a massive medical issue, pandemic worldwide. So stay safe in all senses of the word.
Absolutely. And I think as well, we also realize that this is obviously happening in the US, but that every country, Ireland included, needs to reflect on how they treat people of color. I think that's really important. And to recognize that even if we feel that we're not racist, that there are biases there that can influence, and we need to be open and mindful of that and to talk about it so that we can progress this, for sure. And from my side as well, one of the things I believe, or my view, is that, when you allow lies to, dare I say it, trump the truth, then you're in the words of Louis Michner, the detective of City of Angels, you have shit that begets shit that begets shit. And we're in a whole pile of shit at the moment.
Yes,
but we have now come together in the solidarity and we have talked about the hurt. So let's talk about something nice. Let's talk about what binds us and our listeners, which is talking about these TV shows that we cover. Of course, if you want to, we are all in the group on Facebook. We're on Twitter. If you want to discuss and you just want to chat to us about anything, any of our listeners, we're always there. We're always there. We are a community. It's not a platitude. We are there for each other. So if you want to talk about anything, come talk to us.
And if you want to email us directly, you can email us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries. I always pick up those emails, so pop them on to us.
He's a night owl as well, so any time of the day.
I never sleep,
so. It's great.
Exactly. I know we've talked about this, but I'm sure you guys probably felt the same as I did. This did affect my watching of the episode. I felt this was probably a bit more uncomfortable to watch this episode than they could have even imagined, I think. So we'll probably refer to a couple of things as we go through the episode as well. But yeah, let's get into the actual episode.
It's a strange thing where art imitates life.
But I have to think,
yes,
but I have to think John Logan knew that this has happened recently enough in American history as well. This isn't something that is just confined to the 1930s. So I'm sure he was aware that this is going to be a very sensitive topic because it's something that has happened reasonably regularly, unfortunately, and very sadly in the US.
I am not going to lie. I haven't said this to you two before, but I was literally considering skipping this episode because I was just like, okay, I don't know if I have the mental fortitude to discuss this with a concise and non-verbal scream / profanity induced tirades sometimes. But since my watch, I have taken a few deep breaths. I don't believe in that mindfulness craziness, but
it's great.
If you do, it works for everyone.
Mindfulness
so where it works for some, it works for others. It does work for me. So I went outside, I took a couple of deep breaths, I read a comic book, a quick 30-something pager, and then I came back to this. So let's get into it.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's get some nice thoughts to begin with on the episode. We do have a review that came into us over on iTunes once again. Thanks again for everybody that's been giving us reviews over on iTunes. It's something that we never ask for for people to actually give us reviews. We've been going for 496 episodes, and for our main podcast, the one that's had all 496 episodes, I think we have 5 reviews, because we very rarely actually ask for. We do occasionally ask for them, but very rarely. So it's absolutely lovely that we get some reviews in to us.
Don't we always say share the love, share the podcast?
That's a different
Rate
thing.
us, leave us a review.
I don't normally say that. You might say that, but we did get a brand new review over on Apple Podcasts from titled "A New Listener from America, Now a Big Time Fan" by Pool Player 937. It says, "I'm fairly new to TV podcast industries, but have recently started seeking out podcasts for currently airing shows that I watch to supplement my interests. I started this podcast after the 3rd episode this season and haven't looked back. When I first saw the length of the podcast, I couldn't imagine how they could fill it with insightful takes, but these guys deliver each and every week, leaving me excited for the next episode. Also, maybe I could be drawn in because Ancestry.com says I'm 22% Irish."
Excellent stuff.
That's great.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Pool Player 937. Glad you're enjoying our, relatively long takes for TV shows. I think even by our standards, this is longer than average. Normally we're on the hour mark. So, we've been doing a few 90-minuters there recently.
That's true.
But it is one of these things that when we were doing the recap of the first season or the first 3 seasons of Penny Dreadful, the original 3, they are kind of so layered and textured with detail, and the writing is so good and the acting performances are so good that you have so much to talk about, whether you like it or not, So it's, I think that is one of the occupational hazards for Penny Dreadful.
Yeah, thank you so much, buddy, for the review. Just, as the guys say, sometimes I can't even imagine how we've gone and talked for 90 plus minutes sometimes. Now, not gonna lie, once we spoke for 2 and a bit hours, and it was Derek's job to then get that down to 90 minutes.
Yep.
That was the difficult part.
Yeah.
That certainly was. That took me 2 days. So don't do that today.
So we're gonna keep it concise today.
Absolutely. We also, as John mentioned, we do like if you could share our episodes on social media and share us on social media as well. So we also got a kind of a review or a recommendation from Anitra Leira over on Twitter, who said, "I enjoyed the TV podcast industry's cover of Watchmen. The British perspective was interesting and they gave a lot of info from the original text. And of course, the official podcast that Damon Lindelof did centered around the creative team around women and people of colour, which affected the show profoundly. And TV podcast industries, after listening to your Watchmen podcasts all in one go, almost. Sometimes your overly confident predictions were wildly inaccurate, but the accents made it charming when you made your mea culpas."
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go.
I do love my wildly inaccurate predictions. I'm not gonna lie. It's one of the fun things. I can pull a lot of wild, and that's a very nice way of calling me, or kind of saying that usually I am so wrong. So wrong. But I say it with such conviction that you could think it was correct.
Isn't there a saying around that?
Potentially.
I think there is, and I can't remember it.
Yeah.
Say it with confidence, yeah. That's all.
They're about believing people of conviction.
Yes,
but yes.
Anywho,
but we were very clear,
so
I think,
much,
specifically during Watchmen, because we knew how complex the comic book was, and if the show was anything to go by, we kind of were pretty clear that if we did make a prediction, we kind of write it down so we could return to it as the show went on and apologize when it was definitely confirmed as a no. We definitely got quite a few things wrong in that. But hey, that's the fun of podcasting, isn't it?
Yeah. Grand theories that are ultimately built on dust are great. And we have a lot of them here on the podcast.
It's the fun of watching TV shows.
Exactly.
But, yeah, thanks again, Anitra Leira. That's really good of you to recommend TV Pod Industries. If you are over on Twitter, you can find us there at TV Pod Industries over on Twitter.
Yes, thank you so much, Anitra. We also have one tiny little favor to ask for all of our listeners. We don't ask much, but sometimes when we do, we would love the army of the industrials. Industrials?
The Industrial Army, yes.
The Industrial Army to rise up and to head over to BritishPodcastAwards.com/vote and maybe just kind of in the listener choice section, consider awarding your vote for TV podcast introducers. It would be a lovely thank you, and we would really appreciate it. It's just a way to show your love and for us to receive it in a way of an accolade through the British TV podcast.
That's very communist of you, Chris. Mobilizing the workforce. Yes, exactly.
Or the British Podcast Awards. Yes, BritishPodcastAwards.com/vote. That's it. Yes, so not just TV podcasts. So we will be up against every single sport podcast in the UK. Yeah. The awards themselves are run by BBC Sounds, who do about 60 podcasts in the UK. So very unlikely that we'd be massively high up. But it would be lovely if you'd pop on over there. And
come on, fellow podcast listeners, let us beat the BBC into second place. I'm sure we can. Yeah.
That would be kind of awesome.
That would be amazing, but unlikely.
Yes. Gentlemen, let's get into our discussion about Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, episode 6, How It Is with Brothers. Once again, the episode was directed by Roxann Dawson. We spoke about it last week. Done many, many great shows and was a great actress before starting on our path to direction. This episode was once again not written by John Logan. It was written by Vinnie Wilhelm.
Vinnie Wilhelm. I love that name. Vinnie Wilhelm. Chris.
Yeah.
Sorry, so good.
I waited until now for a German accent.
Do you know
that is a fab name.
My apologies. That's obviously based on the 2.5 years I just spent in Switzerland that I've just called him Vinnie Wilhelm. I'm not sure how that's how he would pronounce it. I should have checked that out.
Vincent Wilhelm.
I think as English speakers, we would say Vinnie Wilhelm.
Yes.
And as German speakers speaking English, we would say Winnie Wilhelm.
That's true. Yes, that's true. Yes,
we'll put both in.
Yes.
There we go. We've covered the bases.
Yeah. But this is Vinnie's first episode of Penny Dreadful. He has written episodes of Castle Rock and The Terror before. One of the things I've been noticing on some of the online forums, places like Reddit and some of the places that are doing kind of reviews and chat about Penny Dreadful City of Angels, a lot of people comparing this to The Terror. The Terror had a lot less supernatural elements to it, but was a very scary show. I know you watched the full first season of that, John, didn't you? Really interesting show on AMC, I think, in the US.
Yeah, it was done by Scott Productions. So, and of course, like, it's such a great story, this idea of a ship called HMS Terror. I mean, like, who calls a ship that? That's like saying, look, here's my lovely child called Adolf, or something like that. You just kind of don't, I suppose, anymore. Yeah. Or the Titanic, calling a ship, we're about to launch, Titanic face, or something like that. I don't know.
I certainly don't call it the unsinkable Titanic. No. That's a really bad idea. That's just asking.
But it was excellent. It's this whole idea of a boat and its crew trapped in the ice, and just what that does to the crew. You know, the terror as much of the crew in that situation compared to let alone just the name of the ship.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Vinnie worked over on that as well, so nice to have him on board for Penny Dreadful City of Angels season 1, let's say. Maybe he'll be back if we get a second season of this show. But John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the episode, or their synopsis for the episode?
Sure. Detectives Tiago Vega and Louis Michner interrogate young Pachuco Diego, seeking a confession whilst Louis senses Tiago is hiding something from him. Miss Adelaide warns Molly about her personal desires jeopardizing the temple's future. Townsend learns of Kurt's surprising past, and Peter Kraft makes a dramatic decision about his marriage with Linda. Meanwhile, Maria tracks down Mateo and pleads with him to come home back to the family.
Yes, back to his family. Yes, despite the assertion from Rio and Fly Rico that they're his new family, he does have the Vega family in the back pocket. Lots to talk about in this episode, but predominantly this is the interrogation episode of the show. They have regularly done on the original series of Penny Dreadful, you would have these episodes which are set up in one room with just a few characters. So this felt, from that perspective, a little bit like the original Penny Dreadful, where you have 3 characters kind of holding everything together. And I have to say, just my own take on the episode, the tension that is in there for this episode, I think is really well balanced. It felt tense every moment that they left that room. That clock was ticking, going, you only have 5 more minutes. You only have,
definitely.
30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, to get this sorted. So I felt that they really did a great job with the tension in the episode.
Yeah, big time. I think, I thought it was just phenomenal, actually. Right. And I think that's my big moment, because I think that final So yeah, I suppose my big moment is the mud hens, the interrogation, but I think more specifically it's that final moment of Lewis, with both Tiago previously and then finally with, Diego, where I think in his weary state, he does what has been asked of him by Vanderhoff, which is to get this patsy. He's also just been informed that his partner is keeping secrets from him, is lying to him. And I think that's the whole thing. This interrogation builds, slowly builds up that tension, that runs through this episode, and it culminates in, this last scene between Tiago, Lewis, and Diego, which is phenomenal. And I love it. I mean, you were talking about the time element of, Vanderhoff saying, well, you've got 45 minutes. Lewis sits down right at the end in this scene and says to Diego, you have 30 minutes, until, we can talk as much as, you like, but Murphy and his gang and his crew of cops, they're not going to talk. They're going to be physical. Yeah. And then after everything gives Diego 5 minutes to effectively think it over, and confess. And I think additional to that time, you just have the tension, between, I think, multiple different tensions between the cops led by Murphy and Tiago and Lewis, as the detectives. You have the tension, between Tiago and Diego. The knowledge that Diego has that he knows Mateo is Tiago's brother. Tiago knows he knows, and he knows that the other people in the room, i.e. Lewis, don't know know this. And as such, you have that tension then with Vega and Michner, and, the secret, the betrayal, and ultimately then the resolve. But, you kind of get this fissure between these two, characters, which, coming off the back of Maria and Lewis's, discussion in front of the Santa Muerta last, week about how Michner had given him the start here with Vega as a detective, and that, Maria being so thankful. And yet then, as Chris, you pointed out, Tiago kind of falls in last week's episode. And he continues here. I mean, even just with the opening where you have, it's been a long night, as Michner's having an early morning swig of whiskey, but he lies immediately, to Lewis, saying that, he doesn't know who this fourth person is, i.e. Mateo. And of course, hanging over all of this, and I suppose what gives the episode its title is the tension, off screen, or at least in different scenes between the two brothers of Tiago and Mateo. That moment where Tiago comes clean to Lewis, because Lewis has understood what's going on in this interrogation. I love the fact that Nathan Lane plays, it's world weary, but it's world weary in the sense that he's perceptive. He knows how the world works. Yeah. It's in the sense of, it's not that he's not trying to change it, but it's in the same sense as with Vanderhoff, where he says, there's reality. And then there's reality. I'm a good intention captain. I want this to go like this, but then I'm confronted with reality. And my boss wants the patsy. He wants this all done. And you have, Lewis, he understands the world in which he lives as, someone of Jewish, heritage, and knows that the cards are stacked. And in a sense, that delivery then to Diego is he knows he's stacking the cards in the same way as is done against him. And it's really tragic. It's really tragic because you can see at the end, when he says to Diego, that's the smart play, kid. I mean, it's a wonderful kind of monologue that Lewis provides and acted by Nathan Lane. But the end of it is, that's the smart play, kid. You're doing the right thing. And you just see Lewis's expression. And he doesn't believe it, but he also, realizes where him and Tiago are. He's trying to protect Tiago in some way, but at the same time doesn't care about his brother. and then is trying to get something for Vanderhoff. So, like, I just thought it was just massively fantastic. I loved how it all weaved through. I think it was just a class act from Nathan Lane here, and also by Daniel Zovatto as Tiago, playing Mr. Angry. You can see he's caught between his job and his family, but his family is always going to win out. The anger of trying to get the confession out of Tiago, and Tiago then, Adan Rocha, who plays Tiago, is just awesome as you think he's going to break. You really do. He has this kind of inward looking, side to him. He's looking down at the desk. And then when he's left alone with Tiago, you see this different side of him where he is effectively trying to call the shots with Tiago. And the loyalty that he has to Rio, Fly Rico, and Mateo in particular, that he won't grass them up. And then that kind of exasperation at the end, his journey in that interrogation room is up, down, up, down, up, down. When he realizes actually what he's going to be allowed to do here by Lewis, because he's no longer got the leverage of knowing Tiago's secret. Yeah. He knows that. And also the wide eyes, the fear of the thought of being let in the same room on his own, with Murphy, and the other cops who are effectively going to beat him. I mean, you hear that moment where Murphy says, "I'm leaving the teeth for Riley's kid when he grows up," or him, the La Cucaracha whistling, and just the baiting that Murphy does to Tiago, and then hearing them in the toilet as Tiago effectively decides, okay, I'm leaving the bullets in this gun because these guys are like, he realizes Diego is in trouble.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that and want to come back to that as well. But I think the moment I found really interesting in this whole scene with Diego was when he realizes his way out. This is the Mudhen story. This is what they do as a defense mechanism. He's looking for his way in. He's looking for what his defense mechanism is going to be throughout that initial interrogation that Tiago's doing. And then the minute he learns that Lewis doesn't know that it's his brother, that nobody has turned in Mateo, he knows his way out. And from that point onwards, and I have to say, in terms of interrogation scenes, in terms of the techniques that are being used by Tiago to try and get this kid to admit to killing or being the only one that killed Riley, which is what he wants out of him. Yeah. All of the techniques he's using, I'd be absolutely terrified in that room. I'd give up everybody for it. But because Diego has this piece of information, nothing's going to work on him. From that point onwards, he's not going to be intimidated at all, because he knows this guy, Tiago, is not going to give up his brother. He knows that this is what brothers do for each other. They save each other. So I thought it was really interesting, but let's have a quick chat about that moment in the bathroom, because I'm not sure how it started and how it ended. I'm not sure what the intention was, because at the beginning you hear Diego say, "Just give me your gun and I'll get my own way out of here. If you can't do anything, I'll fight my own way out of here." And I understand that's why Tiago's going to take the bullets out, is because he's going, okay, does that mean he's saying he will give the gun to Diego and Diego will die in a hail of bullets and then it'll all be sorted? Because he won't have any way of shooting anybody with a gun with no bullets in it. Yeah. Obviously. The rest of the cops are going to fire on him and kill him. So, and then he puts the bullets back in. And when he goes back into the room and Lewis does, try and get the kid to give all the information up, just before he gives it up, Tiago pushes Diego onto the table and puts the gun to his head. So is he going to actually kill him there before Lewis takes him out of the room? Is he actually again going to say, actually, no, I won't leave it to chance. I'm going to kill this kid so that I think has he been pushed this far?
I think it's a threat, at least initially. Maybe he was going to kill him. That's why he puts the bullets back in. And I suppose this is one of the things. Is he going to go with Diego's plan? And hopefully, effectively, from Tiago's point of view, Diego gets killed? Or is it that he was just going to scare him with the gun, but he took out the bullets in case? Or that's how they were going to have the fight, but it didn't kind of move on to that because Lewis intervenes
Exactly.
beforehand.
What do you think, Chris?
So I took it as he was going to so the whole thing is when he unclips it, the gun in the holster, it's visibly noticeable to Diego. So that's the sign. And Diego reaches for it. So the whole thing was that he would have a gun and in his mind be able to escape with the gun. Yes, the initial part in the thing is where Tiago is taking out the bullets was like, I can't see fellow police officers die because of what I'm trying to get my brother out.
Yeah.
So it would be to a degree, he'll either get out or he'll go down in a hail of bullets. Most likely the latter. Then, based on what Murphy and the rest of them say, and as racist as they are, and as violent as they say they're going to be, i.e. the piñata comment.
There's certainly and there's certainly no moments when they're saying we're going to beat the information out of him. They're saying, how many times do you think we're going to have to hit him before he explodes effectively, before he's beaten to a pulp? There is no question that these guys are going to kill him in the pursuit or under the explanation that they are interrogating him. But
so then he puts the bullets back in to the point of, okay, he can take a few of these guys out. These guys are not fellow officers to me. Then he goes back into the room. He's going along with the plan. Diego, he unclips it so that when he gets close, Diego can grab it. But then Diego oversteps the line because he is about to give up Mateo in that point, and he's going too far. And that's where Tiago slips and goes, screw this, I'll do it myself. And kind of just throws the gun to his temple. And in that instant, I say he would have done it. He was that close. You can see the shake and the way that Daniel Zovatto portrays that point. He's visibly like amped on adrenaline. He's like, it's fight or flight. And in this case, it was fight. And it's only when, as you said, it's only because Michner, Nathan Lane, is able to pull him into the corner and then out. That is the saving grace, if you will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like we've been waiting a lot of episodes this season for a big Tiago moment. He's been the perspective of the audience a lot. We're following along with him throughout everything that's been going on and affecting his day-to-day life in the City of Angels, but I feel this was really his episode. I think Daniel Zovatto was really good in this episode, and he conveyed everything that was going on. But one final thing that I have on your point, John.
That's grand. That's why we do it.
Exactly.
It is the biggest point in the whole episode.
It is.
I think we're all going to take parts of it.
Absolutely, but I loved that they called out that Tiago has a different read on why Mateo did what he did. I love that he has a really good explanation as to why he believes it's his own fault and not Riley's fault that Riley's dead. He believes that because he shot his other brother Raul and Mateo saw that, and because Tiago is working for the police, he's effectively punishing the police for what Tiago did. Not anything to do with Riley. He hasn't heard anything about the molestation that Riley visited on his sister. He still doesn't know any of that information. Mateo hasn't said it. His sister Josephina swore him to secrecy to not tell Tiago about this. So Tiago's going off this misunderstanding almost that his kid brother is so annoyed that he has joined the police force and shot at his brother because he's on the side of the police that he's willing to go and kill another officer and start a war with the police. I think that's a really interesting twist on Tiago. Not that much of a twist. Sorry. I just think it's interesting that he said it out loud that this is what he thinks is actually happening and is blaming himself so much.
But it feels really right. I mean, I think Tiago, that desperation, when he kind of pours all of that out to Lewis and he says, so what are you going to do? Just that desperation. Because Lewis has just basically said, well, what about that kid? He's good. He couldn't have killed anyone. But he's not family. He's not my brother. He's not my family. And I love that Lewis says, that's too easy. I think the two of them just play it off so well, in that corridor.
Yeah.
And then to go in with that monologue from Lewis, I just thought was fabulous.
Getting emotional just from the sound of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I felt really kind of connected with this. And I kind of was there with Lewis, where he talks about, his father as a kid, and he talks about no more horses. Yet poor folks will always be left with the shit. Yeah. He connects with the chain of events, that Vanderhoff has effectively just said about, you had Hazlitt, that's a big pile. You've got the riot and 4 dead cops, 8 dead Mexicans. That's a big pile. And then Riley, cuffing you, in this chair, and beating on him. Again, another pile. And we get to that fantastic line of shit begets shit begets shit. And now just look where we are.
Yeah.
But then he goes, but you're playing like a gambler sitting on a full house. Now, let me tell you what cards you're actually holding. I thought it was fabulous. And he just says, you'll go to San Quentin and you'll either go as a rat or a goddamn hero. Yeah. It's your choice. And whichever choice you make, I'll make sure that people know about it.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying, this whole piece with Vanderhoff and with Michner here. Like, these are supposed to be the police in the city. They're supposed to be our good guys almost, because we've been following since the first episode. But what we have here is we have a kid who looks to be about 17, 18, very young into the Pachuco gang, definitely. And he's effectively going down for the murder of a family.
Yeah.
And being told, even though Michner is convinced this kid couldn't have murdered anybody, even Riley, even though he may have been in the place itself where Riley was killed, Lewis is saying this guy didn't do anything. But now by the end of the episode, he's taking credit for the murders of 4 people, the Haslets, plus the murder of Riley. This is one of the really scary things that's come out over the last number of years in investigations in America. These plea bargains have been going on for centuries, or almost a century now, where something like 50% or 60%, I'm going to get that percentage because it's very important I don't misquote this, but a massive proportion of people who are arrested in the US take a plea deal without going to any kind of court case or any kind of investigation and end off going to prison for it because it's easier for the system. And that's what's happening right here. Lewis doesn't want his partner's brother arrested for the murder that he actually did commit, so he's found a patsy here, which will make it easier for the cops and calm down a violent on-street altercation between the cops and the citizens of LA. That's what's happened here, and that's what happens very regularly. This is absolutely the most incendiary part of this episode, and for me, the most difficult part to watch was seeing Lewis, who I really respect as a character in the show, and the acting is fantastically portrayed, but seeing him look at this kid and go, right, let's just close this down. That's what the captain wants. It saves your brother.
No, I disagree. I don't think he is nonchalantly doing that. No, I think it's tearing him apart. And I think that's what I mean at the end, where he says, it's the smart play because it gives you the best outcome. You will be in prison, but you won't be going to that gas chamber that effectively Tiago's just frightened the crap out of him with showing. But by going there now, you go as the hero that will be spread, and it maybe you get out. Yeah. Otherwise you're dead. Otherwise you're beaten up and you're dead. Otherwise, you go as a rat and you're going to be dead in San Quentin. And you see the struggle that Lewis has with that. And I think that's what is so amazing about this, is that someone who doesn't actually want to do this, when he's weighing up the options, this is unfortunately Diego's best outcome. However crappy that really, really is. And that's what tears him up by having to do that. And that's why he's so aggressive towards Tiago, because he has put him in that position to do that, along with Vanderhoff.
And that's the problem. That's the end of their partnership. Yeah. That's it. This is it. This is the break that you have, because Tiago pushes Michner, going, you don't know what this is like. Yeah. You haven't lost anyone. Unbeknownst to Tiago, the two Jews who were killed by the Nazis. That part of Michner's life has not been shared. Yeah. And what we know about Michner is his honor is tied up in his personality, his self-worth. Your son is a good man. He is a good officer. That's why I chose him as my partner.
Yeah.
That's why we are together. He has my back. I have his.
Yeah.
We are good police officers. And in the space of what the show is less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
But for us as 2 episodes, we have seen the fall of both men now.
Yeah.
The last bastions of, if you will, good police officers in the LAPD at this time. They are not racist. They are the minority, the Jew and the Mexican. They are the last bastions of hope for those minority people or those minority communities.
Yeah.
And they have just sacrificed their honor in the space of 1 hour in order to save Tiago's brother.
Exactly.
Who we believe, or they believe, is worthy of saving.
Yeah.
We now know he is not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We like, he has decidedly stepped over that line into the Pachucos, and has stepped away from familia. Like, he is no longer family. In the words of Vin Diesel, you don't belong with this family. Like, he is Fast and the Furious gone. Like, that was a terrible, again, I know my accents, but I'm trying to bring some levity to what is, for me, the hardest part of this, which is those two were so good together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Exactly.
and what we have seen is through a series of unfortunate events.
Movie.
Literally the destruction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's it. Like, everybody feels that if there are people in these positions, they're able to make different choices and save people the way that, and do police work right and not go down the same paths. But as I said, we had Vanderhoff going, this is not the way it goes. I was once an idealistic person. That's why I gave you guys the chance, but we're just going to go down the same path. We always go down. We're going to send the Irish racist cops in to beat this guy and kill him if you don't find the murderer here. That's basically the path.
But I
that he's
also
going
think
down.
with Lewis, the point is that if immediately after, or even at the time, whilst they were investigating leading up to the flop house, he had known if there had been honesty from Tiago.
Yeah.
So this comes back to Chris's point from last week about Tiago slipping. Then who knows? Like, that's why I like Lewis, because he's kind of methodical and analytical, and he may have just said, let Diego go. Because he may have decided not even to bring back Diego to the precinct the next day or after that long night, simply because, well, he's gonna be made responsible. He is going to be this patsy, but because of how it unfolded, he is in that moment either is going to have to say, well, Mateo is the killer, Tiago. And that will impact Tiago, or Tiago is going to somehow kill or engineer the killing of Diego within. And so none of these outcomes for Diego are good now that he's in the precinct. And it could have been different if Tiago had been honest with him. Like Lewis screams at him, "You didn't tell me." And then says, we go back in there and you don't say anything. You've lost the right to be able to decide what happens. And it's really tough. And I think that's what is so phenomenal. I think that's why, as Chris was, I was tearing up. Like, it's just like, it's a real sadness because Tiago, as Chris is saying, doesn't understand Lewis's struggle because of his culture, as a Jew, in the 1930s in America and with what's happening in Europe. This will all, again, our head, a lot of us think it's kind of like around this time is World War II. If you are not too close into history, it's like everyone always assumes the Jews were always persecuted and there's an assumption there. Like, they were not considered vast minorities in the US, until around World War II, till things started getting very, very bad. So it's a tough one. Like, here we see two minorities who are being sidelined and being forced to
decide about duty versus honor or family and versus honor.
Yeah. It's weird. It's because America was supposed to be different from the old world because of the pogroms in Europe directed at the Jewish community in Europe way before 1930s Nazi Germany and what have you. But that general pogroms against the Jewish people, that the US was supposed to be different. It was that's where the old world is left behind. And this new world, and yet everyone finds themselves in the same old, mud hen, shit, basically. Yes.
Like, the systemic racism, is that John Logan is bringing to the forefront, I'm going to hand slide to Derek because one of his points, or a partial element of his point, does discuss how the racism is not just in the police force. It is underlying in the Americas at this point in time. So, Derek.
Yeah, I just found the scene with Kurt and Councilman Townsend on the beach. I found it another really affecting scene. You know, I find these scenes so difficult when they're put on screen. You know, it's this thing we talked about last week where Councilman Townsend is in a very happy place and we're starting to see him as a human. We're starting to see him being, understandable and relatable almost. And he's talking to this guy, Kurt, who we know is a member of the Gestapo. But what we're seeing through Kurt's story is the activation of an American. You know, almost what we've seen with terrorists around the world, where he is sitting in his hometown looking around, speaking about the idea that this area should be a whites only area. Why is somebody not speaking about this? And then he reads Mein Kampf, hears about the Fuhrer, moves to Berlin and says that's the place he wants to live. He joins the Nazi party, becomes a member of the Gestapo, and he says he's massively happy there, and then sent back to what he calls the filthy city of LA.
Yep.
It's absolutely horrible, but it's effectively the story of what's happened with terrorists around the world and how they are incited by their connection to people that have the same beliefs as them. They get sent away they run away from their homes, get all the training, and then come back again to form incels or form terrorist organizations in their local community. You know, you can see Kurt, he's a surfer guy in LA. Basically, this is what we see from this intro to him in the episode. He's able to just blend in with the standard surfers in LA. But
blonde haired, good looking, sun blushed, good in a pair of tight swimwear, surfing.
Yeah, absolutely. Can blend in with anybody else.
Last part out. You just focused on him versus the surfing part.
You know what I mean? And then he comes back to the beach and gives these absolutely abhorrent reasoning behind why he's back in this country. He doesn't even want to be here. He wants to be back in Berlin with all the other right-thinking people in his mind. And he's been sent back here to seed all of this hatred amongst other people like him. You know, it's a really horrible situation. And, you know, I'm questioning the rest of that conversation, and I'm not too sure whether it was just that the writing I didn't feel was great between how that conversation continued, because he ends it saying it's a filthy city, he hates it here, it's full of people that he doesn't like, the types of people he doesn't like. And that's the bit that Townsend is offended by. It's not the fact that he's saying that he's against all of the other races that have moved to LA. It's that he hates LA itself. And Townsend's saying to him, well, I love LA because I came here one way. I came here, wanted to be a dancer, was told I was too fat for it. And then I've now made myself into this very powerful figure here. So LA it doesn't care who you are once you arrive here. It cares who you are and what you make of yourself when you're in LA. Completely glossing over the fact that this guy has just said he's a Nazi and he doesn't want to be here. He wants to get rid of all the other races, you know? We know Councilman Townsend has no love for anybody who's not a white American. We know that from the very first introduction of the character. Yeah. But it's just a weird conversation where, is that the thing you took offense to? He doesn't like your city? Yeah. He's not talking about town planning, like, you know? Yeah,
because that was the bit that stood in such stark contrast to me.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of whiplashed by that. Really? He just doesn't like LA and you hate that part? And then that coupled with the rest of this episode from a Mexican and a kind of a Jewish perspective, and every other race that is mentioned by Kurt, is like, oh yeah, racism was everywhere back then.
Yeah.
You were white, you were right, you were big, you were powerful, you had the privilege, everyone else, and there was no, it wasn't hidden or veiled, it just sometimes wasn't discussed.
Yeah.
Aside from the cursory kind of curse, they weren't even used as curse words back then, like the C word or the S word, towards narratively discussing these races. There was just a word used.
Yeah.
It was just so systemic.
Yeah,
back then. It was accepted. And that was the bit, because it's like, I don't care about you talking about all these other Americans people who were born here, or just because their race is slightly different. It's don't say anything bad about my city, because the city is where I love. And that's the crazy part.
And once again, because there's always got to be a contradiction in these types of speeches in this show. You hear what he's saying here. You hear what Kurt is saying to Townsend. I didn't like that people were coming here, taking our jobs the kind of basic way that people were coming to our town, which is a white-only town, living here where I don't want them to live. So I moved to Berlin.
Yeah, exactly.
I moved to Germany. I moved to another country and started taking on the ideals of people that I found there, and now I'm bringing them back to America. So I don't like immigrants, so I became an immigrant myself, left the country, and then came back again.
That's the other weird thing, isn't it, on the immigration issue, is that, as someone who's moved to Ireland, and I have been sat in the back of taxis where and it's not a slight on taxi drivers, but some have kind of given out about, not about me, or not a person who is white and who has immigrated, but a person who has come from and has colour on their skin. And I'm kind of like, it's a very tricky kind of conversation to be listening to and to having to respond to that in a sense. But it's like, I think that's the thing is that here it is two white people. And I think that's the thing with Townsend's response, is that implicit within everything he says, even though it actually sounds really progressive and libertarian, that this city, you can be who you want to be, as long as you make it effectively, that it's not about race and not about colour. It's about whether you've got the chops to move up the pecking order or make the best of your life as you can. That almost seems like what he's saying. But implicit within everything that he's saying is that, but it excludes anyone who isn't white.
Exactly.
And unless they're really, really famous, but even then it's grudgingly held. So I think that's where it's because actually, they're two white people talking about it with a very overt bias in Kurt, to the point where he's joined the Gestapo. But I think with Townsend, it's more introspective and maybe unconscious bias element of it, and unconscious racism, that he doesn't see it as an issue because everyone else who he works with is that. The only thing I was wondering on this, which I found fascinating, is this a chink? Because as I say, for me, when Townsend talks about it, I just thought, okay, that's quite progressive, Townsend. In the sense of you can be who you want to be. If you take it in the all-encompassing way, then I just wonder, is this a chink to allow him to move beyond his racism and his racial bias within the story? Is it an avenue for the writers to kind of say where he actually does begin to reassess his views? I don't know, maybe not, but I just wondered because of how he responded to Kurt. Yeah. But I still think there was an underlying racism element there.
Yeah.
It's the funny part about this is these two men are gay.
Well, that's the other thing, exactly.
That's that is out and out hated in America at this point, and in Germany at this point.
Yeah.
Like, it soon would be illegal in Germany within a couple of years.
Yeah.
It's the contradictions, absolutely.
It's the contradictions. So, but it's also Townsend is starting more to accept that he is becoming. He's becoming more accepting of this half of himself. Maybe. So it could be as John says, the first steps towards redemption, if you will. But I wouldn't be too sure.
Yeah. It feels like he's accepting his lover's point of view.
Yes, exactly.
That's
and I
more
think
than
it's the indoctrination, as you said.
Yeah, and as I mentioned last week, I did feel like there was a point in episode 5 where it felt like Councillor Townsend was kind of going, maybe I can live my life like this. Maybe I can come out and maybe I can be the first gay mayor of LA. And then he was put back in his box by Alex pretty quickly. Kurt sent over to the house, or Kurt over in the house that night to keep reining back in again. Let's get you back to normal here, mate, kind of thing. Again, I think there is still a question over whether Kurt's gay or not, because this seems to be his mission.
I don't think so.
So make sure that we're clear that I'm not even sure if Kurt is gay or whether this is all an act.
Yeah.
But they're definitely manipulating Townsend into what they want him to do, and he's not questioning what I would have thought he would be questioning out of this. They're planted all this information and all these seeds in his mind pretty well.
Yeah. Okay, so we very much kind of discussed part 1 of this, the mud hens, the interrogation, and the suing tragedy that comes from it. So we'll move on to, if you don't mind, my point for this episode, which is faith versus love.
Yeah.
And how that theme plays in 2 major parts of this. So the first is Mateo. It's the faith in the Pachucos versus the love of family. So his faith in that the Pachucos and Rio are steering him right and they want what's best for him versus the love of his family and what they want of him. And it's interesting. We get Mrs. Mammy Vega, like, kind of coming up to the Pachuco flophouse, like, to get Mateo.
Yes, we do.
And him decidedly siding with the Pachucos and Rio, and I am one of them now. I am not a Vega. So as an aside, very, very quickly, that split second where Maria Vega looks at Rio, like she turns around and stares deeply at Rio. Does she know that's Magda? We discussed this. Could she be seeing through the guise that is Rio? I
wanted more out of that. I think the scene, and I'm sure I'm not going to go into it myself because I know you definitely loved it as well. But the scene itself, I think, is really, really good. I absolutely love how the scene itself is played. From a Penny Dreadful point of view, I really wanted there to be something like the only reason that Maria found the place is because she once again channeled Santa Muerta, or maybe she is actually the embodiment of Santa Muerta because that's why she's been getting so much that she wants from Santa Muerta. And if that's the case, there has only been one version of Magda that she's met in the city of LA, and that is Rio. She's not met any of the other versions. We noted that she was at the party for the kids at Dr. Kraft's house, but never once was she involved enough to have met Elsa in those scenes. There's no reason that she could have met Councillor Townsend's Alex version of Magda. So this is a scene where we have the person that's channeling Santa Muerta meeting one of the Magdas here, and I don't know at all. I thought there was going to be some kind of sparks flying between the two of them. I thought there was going to be much more of a push potentially from Rio to say, you're not allowed here, old woman, or something more from it. But it just felt like Rio was just Rio of the Pachucos, and Maria was just the mother of Mateo who knew where they were.
I just wanted that flash. So when Mama Vega turned around and looked at her in that mid-conversation, I wanted there to be just that kind of very much TV flickery of Rio turns back to Magda, goes back to Rio. It's a blink
that would have been
you'll
great,
miss it.
actually.
Because that then... So, and I mean, and we'll discuss this more in a second. At the moment, the only Penny Dreadful supernatural elementy of this so far has been the very kind of first episode. It's not as prevalent in this as I would have hoped. Like, aside from Magda just being 3 different people, like, you could say it was almost triplets. Like, this is the triplets. This is the Magda / Santa Muerte family kind of. And although it's 3 triplets versus Santa Muerte, and they're just sowing deceit. Like, it's not supernatural.
And I would argue that with the first 3 seasons, the supernatural was the overarching element in the background of the 8-episode first season, 10-episode second season, 8-episode third season. That was the overarching 9-episode third season. I always forget that. It was the overarching background element to it, but most people acted like we're in the Victorian era. This is how we act in the Victorian era. So I understand what you mean, but I think the supernatural element in a way is actually more prevalent, because in every other episode, and that was my point, which I will talk about in a second, but in every other episode, we have had the character of Magda performing her supernatural act of hiding in plain sight and whispering in people's ears throughout the season so far. So, I do actually think it's almost a little bit more prevalent in this season.
I think, I mean, I thought I would, like Chris, it would have been nice to have had that recognition. And I think this idea of like Maria could see beneath Rio, and all of a sudden you just got that phase in and out of Magda appearing, and it unsettles Maria. And then maybe, next episode we get to learn more where she's definitely praying her little cotton socks off to Santa Muerta, to make sure that her youngest son is going to be safe. Mm-hmm. So I think I would have liked something like that for sure.
Because actually looking at the scene itself, the moment itself where she looks at Rio, she gives the same look to Florico. So it's more, what have you done to my boy that he's here? That's kind of what the look means. It didn't look like a moment of recognition from Maria to Rio being Magda. It looked like a moment of, who are you two people that have stolen my boy away?
But no, exactly. But I think as well, just in that scene, I thought it was like really good, really heartbreaking.
Oh,
and I was just like going, Mateo, when he goes, she's right, you're not welcome here. I just thought, I can't believe he just said that to Maria Vega, to his own mother. It really was heartbreaking. And I like, to your point, Chris, this idea, belief in one thing or the other. In this case, it's the faith in the Pachucos that this is only how he can move forward, rather than the love and the faith of his own family. And we see him really, taking a pretty deciding line here. And, of course, that has implications as well to how Tiago has been thinking, this whole thing has played out.
Yes.
And it has consequences on that side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I thought, like I said, it's this faith versus love theme is very prevalent throughout this episode, like not going backwards, but from the Tiago perspective, it's his love of his family and his brother versus his faith in the system of justice, of the police force, of what justice is. Mm-hmm. It's this prevalent, and it even goes back to Molly. This is my other point. Yeah. This faith versus love. She starts to talk about how she is falling for Tiago. Mm-hmm. She has feelings for him. And over her buttered molasses with, what was it? Maple syrup? Sugar?
That was the molasses. So the molasses is sugar and it's butter, and it looked to me like grits. That's what I was thinking it was. It was butter, molasses, and grits. Look, that's a
like a porridge of some description.
Kind of. It's a reasonably regular Southern American dish. It's you'd see it a lot in the South.
Okay. I didn't know. It did not look appealing. Not gonna lie. I will happily try it. If someone wants to send me some and tells me, like, this is how you prepare it, or next time I'm in the South, I will try it.
Probably wouldn't post it.
Yeah, the envelope might get soggy.
Pretty sticky envelope, definitely. Yeah. But you could seal it with the molasses.
Sticky envelopes. Yeah. Way! Still PG-13. Oh, yeah. But this scene is difficult because what we do see, it's this faith in her flock.
Yeah.
Faith in her faith, her faith in God and Jesus and her flock.
Too many faiths, roll back.
Yeah. It's her faith in her faith. You gotta have faith to faith. Ooh,
I know. I thought you were going to burst into out of tune George Michael rendition.
Hey, it's all about that, baby. At least I'm not doing it with a German accent.
No,
that would be awful.
That would have been
Thankfully.
awful. But anyway, this discussion they have over breakfast. So Molly and her mother, it's that push and pull of, I want to be Molly, simple Molly, real Molly, and I am starting to feel or love towards Tiago to be that normal person versus my faith in as her mother says, the flock. Your flock will be disappointed. Your flock will have problems with this because they will not agree to you leaving. They don't care that you want a normal life. They just want Sister Molly. So it's this push versus pull, the faith versus love, versus love of family. It's a tough one because you do see she chooses the flock.
Yeah.
Or we're led to believe she's choosing the flock because that last scene with her is her standing and singing the song, which kind of talks about the lost love and the one I will never have.
Absolutely. It's but not for me, the Irish George Gershwin song that she's singing, which is specifically about everybody else finds love, but not me. Like it's definitely hammering the nail in the idea of herself and Tiago as a friendship and a relationship. But this definitely feels like something that Miss Adeline has used, a lever that she's used a number of times over the years, to pull Sister Molly back in line, you know? If you do this, everything falls apart. Everything we've built. The charities that you've built, the girls' school that you've set up, all of that stuff falls apart because we lose all of the support. And she loses all of her money. She loses all of the support that the church gets from their congregation. It's probably disingenuous, I would think. You know, it's one of those things that you hear. I know it's slightly small time, but you hear it from like the Disney kids. You hear it from the kids that are recording records at 15, 16 years old, you know, and all the boy band and girl band people. They're always told by their managers, you can't get into a relationship because then all of your fans will distance themselves from you. They'll all walk away and you'll lose all your money. And that's the pressure that's put on them as they're going into their careers. And this is the same type of pressure that's being put on Molly to become Sister Molly, the stage version of herself. But you do hear from her mother saying, you know, you tell yourself this lie. There's two different versions of Sister Molly. There's only been one. So I'm not too sure with Miss Adeline. It's a very short scene again between these two. And there is a lot going on with so many characters in the show. It is telling the story of an entire city, really. So sometimes some of the intentions behind these scenes can be slightly lost or a little bit muddled because it's just such short scenes. And I'm not too sure how much more time we're going to spend on this idea of poor little rich girl is the forefront of a church that's making a hell of a lot of money and taking people's money by saying to them she has a direct connection with God, and her saying, well, I don't want that. I want to go off with my boyfriend. You know, I'm not too sure whether that's going to be a central story for the rest of the series, but it feels like it's something that has been touched on in almost every episode. And either we need an episode with Molly, with a flashback perhaps to her past, that it feels more connected to the show, because as we've said before, it's also not connected to the Magda storylines, which tend to be all the central stories throughout the season.
Unless, as you were saying last week, somehow she's calling on Santa Muerte, but we need to kind of see that. Yeah, I mean, I thought this was a nice scene between Molly and her mother, and I think in that, I mean, it was important to have this idea that her mother, you know, is talking about, you know, at the moment, I've kind of gotten the impression from Miss Adelaide that she would just simply send out Randolph and it would be like punch, punch, hack, hack, and problem sorted. And I think this idea that, you know, maybe she's more than that, okay, that he's just following her and maybe takes action. But here she's trying to reason with Molly, as a mother would, I feel. And I think I know it's different because it's mother-daughter, but also effectively a business, seeing the amount of cash registers that were ringing in episode 1.
And someone around that breakfast table is responsible for the death of the 4 Haslets as well.
Yeah.
Which is still in the back of my mind. I'm like, why do we not know this yet?
I thought this was necessary, because And that's the thing. It will be interesting to see how that plays out, given what's happened in this episode now with Tiago, where he's effectively taking the fall. So I think it was important to have this conversation between the two and let's see how it kind of connects in more to possibly what's happening with Tiago. But yeah, there is a lot of stuff going on with 4 episodes to go. So I suspect it will be fairly roller coastery actually with what's happening.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting to see this faith versus love, be it the faith in the flock, faith in the Pachicos, faith in the justice and serve and protect and the police force versus your love of to be Simple Molly, your love of family, your love of your brother. Like, it's interesting to see how they're not contemplating it, but playing them off each other. And when you think one would win, very much, I thought family and mother love would beat out the love of the faith in the Pachuco code and the Pachucos. No. Yeah. So it's that I thought the love of Simple Molly, and the love of Tiago would beat out the faith in the flock.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
So it's that I thought the love of the force and truth, justice and the American way and would beat out the love of a brother.
Right. Especially when he's confessed to murder. So yeah.
Exactly. And that's it. So it's flipping what you would believe.
Yeah. I have to say though, Johnathan Nieves is playing that role really well. The kid who plays Mateo. He looks absolutely terrified. You know, there's that conversation that we already spoke about with Lewis saying he looked into the eyes of Tiago and goes, this guy didn't kill anybody, because he just looks scared about going to prison, from Lewis's point of view. The way Johnathan Nieves is playing Mateo is he looks terrified as what he's just done. Yeah. You can tell that he's murdered somebody, and he's looking around the room at everything that's going on. You see Fly Rico acting like nothing's wrong here. We're just hiding out. You know, they're listening to the radio, and he's laughing at the idea of the ventriloquist dummy having a radio show. He finds this hilarious, and Mateo is like, focus on this. Focus on the fact that I just murdered somebody and it's a cop. You know, that's why he throws the radio across the room, I presume, to smash the thing up, because he just can't understand why everybody else seems to be so calm in the circumstance when he's just told his brother that he's murdered a cop and his brother's after him, you know. So I really love how he's playing that particular
and
role.
he looks actually he wants to go and own up, but is dissuaded by Rico and Rio. So
he's told just to let take the blame.
He is playing it really, really well. Even just the look on his face. I mean, I just felt the kind of, no, you don't belong here. Well, he didn't even say that. You're not welcome here.
To Maria.
Like to, Maria, his mom. Just like, yeah, you can believe he thinks that in that. It's great, great acting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just onto my final point, if you guys are done with your elements.
Absolutely.
There's not much left for me to take, but that's fine. We talked about all the big moments from the episode. I just kind of wanted to make that.
You get the big one next week.
Exactly.
For once, we won't let John take the big one.
I know. That's fine.
Mine wasn't the big one.
But the other element that's just I haven't really talked about that much is just, I found it interesting. We're on the 6th episode of the show in the second half of the season, and every episode we have had a lot of Magda controlling things, either through her actions or through her actions in first and second episode from actual Magda, or through the words that she's saying to people and they're kind of enacting what she wants them to enact. In this episode, we only see Rio once, and she doesn't really say much. She tries to tell Maria Vega not to come into the place to see her son, but Maria gets by because Mateo wants his mother in there. But we don't see her anywhere else. What we do see are the ripples of the things that she'd put in place. We see the fact that Alex has set up Kurt and Townsend together. We see how that's playing out now. They are definitely the right people for each other because they seem to have similar beliefs, and Kurt is definitely doing his work now to push Townsend into an even more racist place, possibly, and even an even more controlled place, definitely, from the Germans, which is exactly what Alex wants of him. And then we see the other side of it, which the one we haven't talked about yet. Dr. Kraft has absolutely fallen for the manipulations of Elsa. He's now leaving his wife, taking the children, and doing something absolutely abhorrent. I think this kind of gave me a little flag again back to the treatment of Vanessa Ives back in season 1 of Penny Dreadful. This idea that he's just turned down to his wife and said, I'm a doctor, you're a drunk. Doesn't matter why you're drunk. I'm going to be sending you off to a sanitarium for intemperance and hysteria. And if you kick up a fuss, you'll never see your children again. This was something, again, that we talked about a number of times with Vanessa Ives. She had a threat over her all the time that somebody would send her to a sanitarium. A man in a position of power would send her to a sanitarium because that's just what gets done. And suddenly, even though we haven't seen Linda on screen very much, we have seen some very funny moments with her. But suddenly I felt for this character massively. Definitely. You suddenly feel this. She may be powerful. She may be strong. She may be willing to try and break up Elsa and her husband, but then you realize that the power is still in the hands of her husband at the time. Yeah. He's still willing to send her off. But I do like how that scene ends. I like that the scene ends with her calling that out, going, you think you're powerful, you think you're strong right now, but let's just see how this plays out, kind of thing. So I did like how that scene played out. But it's really intriguing to me that, you know, just even that idea, this guy has just had a party for like 300 people over at his house. What's going to happen next weekend? Oh, my wife's in the sanitarium. I've got this hot blonde 25-year-old German girl moved in, taking care of my kids. Like, you know, is all the rest of the community going to accept that, you know?
Yeah, they would. But then at that time they would. Because she's in a sanitarium.
Because that's one of the, I suppose that's one of the intriguing things that we saw a lot in the, as I say, the Victorian version of Penny Dreadful was a lot of people were willing to just go through whatever they were going through to keep their reputation as a couple, as husband and wife. But it's well known that each person was cheating on their partners with somebody else, kind of thing. Whereas here it seems to be, right, well, I have a way of getting rid of my wife, which is send her off to the sanitarium and bring in this murderer to my house to take care of my kids. It's what's happening with Dr. Kraft, because he's completely believing all of the stuff that she's telling him.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, Peter is basically, my notes had Peter is awful. Like, what a despicable, dreadful man. And I kind of like the idea that Linda brings up about his dark secret. You know, she says, I know you, Peter. But at this stage, I want to know what that is. I want to know what that is because, it's, I can imagine Tom and Trevor's faces dropping to the floor when all of a sudden they've got Elsa in the house and not their mum Linda. So I'm just kind of there going, yes, he may hold all the cards, but his kids are going to go, what on earth? And
especially if Frank
is going to be the
late night stories.
Exactly. And you know, at the end of the day, I think you're right. I think it's a really good part of the show, though, that, you know, a character we've not really seen too much of, just the way it was played. You kind of really do feel sorry for Linda. I mean, you know, I was kind of there going, look, Linda, I'll come and join you to drown your sorrows. Because, you know, I just hope she gets vindictive and goes after him. That's what I'm really hoping to see, the full force of resting bitch face Linda, sort of exact her revenge here.
And it's certainly something that, looking back on the series already, even in the only few scenes that we've seen with Linda, you can see now the separation. You can see that she had zero friends at the party that for her children. You know, it was Dr. Kraft that was working the room. Peter was going around to everybody, knew everybody, had all his German friends, also had all the other families. She was propping up the bar, and the only person she knew and was talking to was the bartender to serve her drinks. So she's completely isolated by everything that's going on.
Well, the consequence of this is that Maria Vega may see another form of Rio. So she has seen Rio, and if Elsa comes to live with the family, and she will see. So I think that's probably what this mechanism is doing. But I do want to kind of understand Peter's dark secret, because it felt, because there's so much happening, it felt like a jump. You know, we've just had the kids' birthday party, and all that, and then it's been a couple of like dodgy bits of nookie by an open window, and then over the grave of a randomer who's been murdered and passed off as a husband. And
like Linda was right about him having some really odd fascinations in bed, really.
So
odd kinks. Yeah,
I think the Peter story needs to crystallize, and maybe it's crystallizing towards the fact that this will be another Magda that Maria sees, assuming that it looks the same, because otherwise, where's the crystallization here? Is it with Peter and the American German Bund, and that connection in with the Nazis? Is that's part of it? And maybe that's Elsa's drive here in this, but, and what's this dark secret, and how is that linking in?
Yeah. It'd be really interesting to find out.
So I think they need to just kind of spool up a bit with Peter.
Yeah, definitely.
And his storyline.
I think that's kind of the challenge as well. Like, as we said, coming into this series, we have Rory Kinnear, who's probably one of the most well-loved actors from the original Penny Dreadful, and the only one of the cast returning for this show. I think everybody was expecting to be quite central to the show, right? And you kind of could have chosen anybody else to do this particular role. So, but he is a great actor, really enjoying what he's delivering, but it's only a couple of minutes every week. So I'm hoping that we're going to get more as this wraps up for the rest of the series. But that was my point, was just, it was an interesting episode because everything was spinning on from the influence of Magda, but Magda wasn't appearing in everybody's back pocket this time, like she was in all the rest of the episode. So only Rio for a couple of seconds of the episode. Yeah, no, I agree. I like John's idea. But give me more of this story quickly, otherwise I will riot. Gentlemen, I think it's time we move on to Notes of the Dead. Yeah, any notes for the episode? The only one that really kind of popped out to me was just a threat. I just thought there's a reason it's there, I suppose, more than anything else, was the threat from Tiago of sending him to the brand newly built gas chamber in San Quentin. I'm sure it's there because obviously there was fighting against the Nazis, well known for using gas chambers, but just even the description of everything that was going on there, them using it as a threat against Diego, it felt like it was clearly positioned to reference what was going on or what will be going on in Nazi Germany. Yeah, that was the same note that I had. The idea that actually, the capital punishment in California at that time was in fact gas chambers, which just seems like fairly horrific in its own sense. But that they were using cyanide gas like the Germans used as well seems to me equally sort of horrific. But yeah, because the same thing, you know, they were passed off as showers in the concentration camp so that they would be unclothed, in the same way that Tiago is saying that they just strip you to your underwear. And the same thing about breathing deeply or holding your breath, that was one of the big things that, yes, the instinct is to hold your breath. Yeah. And that makes it worse. Yeah, absolutely. That's it for notes, that I know. Yeah. Same here. Chris, do you want to kick us off? What did you think of the episode overall? I loved it. It was difficult to watch, though, based on what we opened with this at the beginning of this episode. It still felt quite real in the current environment and landscape of 2020. It's hard to not see the parallels between what is on screen and what is right on, well, as you guys said, what's on your other screen when you turn into the news, or on your phone when you go onto Twitter. That aside, the story that John Logan and the rest of the writing crew and the staff and the actors are doing is fantastic. It is well done, and it does grow. I am getting the Tiago story is fantastic, and I'm happy with that thread line. There are one or two where I wanted to speed up because we are down to our last 4 hours, less than 4 hours. I'm sure they probably will, but the Dr. Kraft storyline, we have theories of where it might go, how it might kind of twine into the greater story, because that's the thing. Most of these stories have to twine and kind of come back on itself, like the Ouroboros snake, if you will. It has to come back and eat its own tail in order for the story to make sense, and that some of these characters are there. All these characters are there are for a reason. It's just right now that's not fully apparent. It's not saying it's not a good story. It's just saying that I can't see where the destination is with some of these characters, and I just want to. As you said, Greg Kinnear is a well-known actor, and I'm assuming he would not have said he would come back if this means nothing.
there is probably a reason he is playing this character. So yeah, I just want to see where it goes. As a whole, I'm still loving the season. It's just hard to watch. This is 2 episodes back to back where I'm like, one, we had assault, and mutilation, and this we've had racial abuse, and injustice. And it's just, oof. Yeah. Okay, can I just have one with unicorns and fluffy dolls and like Penny Dreadful, the Care Bear edition? Although I'm probably sure that would be really nightmare inducing.
That probably would be, Chris. Yeah, it might be the wrong show.
yeah. Okay, scrap that. Anywho, Mr. Harrison, John.
Thank you. I was thinking we could have Penny Judge Dreadful, which could be like this little girl with pigtails who heaps out dreadful punishments.
I am Judge the law. Dredd. Oh, sorry, it should be, I am the law.
Exactly. It would be quite good. My thoughts. I love this episode. I really did. My only slight complaint is I really want to know Peter's dark secret. Come on, Peter. Just let it all. Come on, Linda. Get over your hangover and spill the beans. Let us find out. But I really loved this. I think this is my favourite, and that's why I'm giving it 5 distrustful, unblinking fish eyes out of 5.
Nice.
And it's mainly just around the central interrogation. I loved it. Yeah. And I didn't know I loved it as much as I did until I watched it the second time. But I knew I kind of did after the first time, just because of that Lewis Michner tour de force in the interrogation. And I think all the other little side scenes really felt meaningful, even though they were quite short. I mean, even Peter and Linda's, just because of how Linda was there in that moment. It felt, as I say, still Peter and Linda's story, Peter Kraft, I need to know more, but I don't want that to take away from sort of the heart-wrenching reconnection of Maria and Mateo. I thought it was nice having Molly and her mother sit down, just having this conversation, rather than her mother seemingly completely sort of distant from her own daughter, even though it's an unusual situation. I thought that was really good as well. And I think Kurt and Townsend on the beach, it was just a nice little sort of ticking over of that there. But ultimately, the star of the show for me was from the very opening, where you have the long night and Detective Michner grabbing his flask of whiskey, to that moment where he is finishing the episode with whiskey poured by the other celebratory cops in the precinct, because they've got their patsy. Yeah. And everything that goes in between there is massively tense. It's sad. It's challenging, and I thought it was really, really good. And who knew that it would fall at this particular time with the events happening as well. So strange how the stars align, I suppose. But that's why I give 5 distrustful, unblinking fish eyes out of 5. Derek.
In unison now. 1, 2, 3.
Derek, what about you?
I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was really, really good. I do wonder, just to kind of echo what both of you guys are saying, I wonder if they just removed everything other than the storyline for Tiago and Lewis and Diego in the police station. Would it have worked better as an episode? It's something that, as I mentioned before, they have done quite regularly on Penny Dreadful, where they take a few characters and just have effectively a stage play with those characters. The episode itself is almost, I think it's just over an hour. It's an hour and 1 minute long. Like it's the full length that they have available to them on a TV show at the moment. So, whether they could have just shortened that down or removed those other scenes out of them that didn't feed into this main storyline, or maybe just keeping Mateo and Maria's meeting as well in the episode, because that's what the whole episode is about, is Tiago trying to save his brother from going to prison. And if you just have that little tag at the end, maybe, of Maria visiting her son, just to show what he's doing at this time, maybe that could have worked for the episode. But it felt like it was a total choice to have Dr. Kraft speaking to his wife at this point in this episode, that felt like that could have been in last episode. There's no particular need to stick it in here. There's no particular need to have Curse and Councilman Townsend on the beach in this particular episode. That could have been a different episode as well. So it felt like editing choices. Once they have all of these elements of the story, they go, and we can probably fit in a few of those minutes here in this episode, but I can imagine the tension that would have been there if the episode was purely about the interrogation in that room. They probably could have really intensified it even more. And it was tense as it was and very difficult to watch. I'm not going to repeat anything we said at the beginning, but this was definitely one of the most difficult episodes of TV I've had to watch, just purely because switching off the news, turning this on and switching the news back on directly afterwards felt like too much, this week. So, I hope you all enjoyed the episode at least and enjoyed the performances of what's going on there. It's been a tough one to discuss, this week, but I'm always happy to be talking with you guys anyway. Yeah.
As I said, like listening to this usually helps, parse my thoughts in a better, and discussing this, I should say, with you two helps me parse thoughts. But when speaking of thoughts, I think it's about time we move on to some feedback.
Speaking of thoughts, I like it.
First of all, if any of you have any thoughts on this episode or in general, you can send them to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com.
That's it.
Or join us on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. We're also over on Twitter at tvpodindustries. First of all, we have some feedback on episode 5 from the one and only Ronaldo, over from Australia, or more importantly, should I say, the High Khonshu, I believe, from Into the Night, a podcast, a Moon Knight podcast, excuse me. He has a voicemail, so to cue it up, Derek.
Hello gents, this is Ray, just dropping in some thoughts, albeit a little late, for episode 5 of Penny Dreadful City of Angels. My gosh, there's a lot happening with this. I haven't listened to your review as yet, but I'll be doing that shortly after I drop these thoughts. So apologies for any, double dipping on ideas or thoughts, which I'm sure you guys have covered anyway quite extensively. But I guess from my perspective, it was great. There was just a lot going on with all the characters. I love it. You can pick which kind of arc you want to follow. I kind of like how I kind of like it, and kind of a little cynical of it, of how the Vega family, I guess, are so integral to many stories of this. So when Tiago's sister met up with Molly, and then it slowly was revealed to Molly that she was actually the sister of Tiago. It was kind of like, Molly must be thinking kind of what I was thinking of. Oh gosh, these Vega family members, they're everywhere. And then also Mateo as well, being caught up and Tiago finding out that he was involved in the slaying of Riley, which kind of makes sense, of course. I mean, there was an altercation with the cops and Mateo and his sister, whose name eludes me. There's so many characters, but that was good as well. I mean, I love that the thing with Tiago not telling Lewis everything, and I can understand how frustrating that might have been for Lewis, but also just how experienced he is, and I love how Lewis said in the car, he's just up front with Tiago, saying, look, I know that you're hiding something from me, and you're quite, volatile and unstable, and all Lewis wants is to make sure that this very potentially dangerous situation, he's not charging in with someone who's a loose cannon. So I really love that interplay between those two characters as well. And then, of course, there's Natalie Dormer, just fantastic in her various roles, whether it is for the Councilman or Elsa. Oh my gosh, Elsa and Kraft. I loved how it tied into the beginning. So all you needed was that little thing at the beginning to drop, to show she's picking up this guy, and I was thinking when I first watched it, oh, what's happening there? But she's using him, killing him, and passing him off as her husband because it's all fabricated. We know. So that was a nice little clever touch. Also, finally, look, I can go on and on, but Townsend I thought was really. I loved his portrayal here because he is a guy basically kind of swooning. In love, or at least the idea of love, after, having spent a night with that killer, the assassin for Herr Goss. Anyway, I loved his take, the way he was behaving. It was very good. I mean, it's a nice pick up and change of pace for him because something's entered his life. He seemed a bit more carefree. He was saying, why not just people got to live a little. It's not all about work. And I love the dance that he did. My gosh, anyone dancing in front of a full glass facade, I always worry that there's going to be a bullet or something heading his way, but no, it wasn't. And so that was fun, and I really enjoy all the music of that era as well. So a fantastic look. There's a lot more to cover. I'm sure you guys will go through it, like that student who runs into Lewis's friend at the diner. There's more stuff with Kraft and how he had played with his family but left them to go see Elsa. So many things happening. Really love it. I'm watching it as soon as I can every time it kind of drops. So apologies for this being a little late, but I'm hoping to still drop these in because it's just so cool to talk about. Anyway, all the best, guys. Keep it up, and I'll be listening.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Ray, for your thoughts. Ray was the co-host on our Penny Dreadful podcast for leading up to the launch of City of Angels. But because it's in Australia and these episodes come out at different time zones, we can't get him on for the main part of the show. But good news, just confirmed this week he will be on for our wrap-up episode, the episode after the end of Penny Dreadful City of Angels. He'll be on for that. We'll probably get him to announce the winner of our table quiz, John, or our pub quiz.
Yeah.
Only if he does it in song.
Yes.
Yeah. And with a drink in his hand. Exactly.
And in a German accent. Or a German-Australian accent.
Yeah.
I now want to hear that.
No.
Ray, give me the German-Australian accent.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
Well, I was taking notes and I was like, must stop dancing in front of the windows in case I get hit by a stray bullet.
Absolutely.
I just connected Elsa to Let It Go. So that's where my brain went.
But certainly, I thought that. I must say, I thought there was something worse going to happen to Townsend there, or we would see some kind of beat down through that lovely open expanse of window.
I thought it was even simpler than that. I thought he was right in front of this big glass window. They've established that everybody in the city can probably see this big glass window, and he's about to get a gentleman caller coming over to see him. I just assumed the press were going to sit and be involved in this, and there was going to be photographs of Townsend, thought that's what it was going to be.
No, there isn't.
Yeah, but we all knew there was something, or all thought there was something sinister about those windows.
And those Vegas do get everywhere. I think Maria Vega needs to start. Is there a candle for sort of blending into the background that Santa Muerta can do?
Maybe.
I think maybe.
The camouflage candle.
Yeah, camouflage candle. That's why she can't find it. To do her prayers. So I wonder if. I did like Molly's look on her face though, because it was like. No, I've just told the same story to your brother, but it wasn't the same. Uh-oh, gonna get caught out.
So, thank you so much, Ray. Moving on, we do have a bit more voicemail feedback on episode 6 this time from the one and only, the illustrious Steve Brown.
Hello, TV Podcast Industries. This is Steve,
Hello.
and this is for episode 7 of Penny Dreadful, City of Angels. Just blanked for a second. I just finished watching it for the second time. I just blanked in my head. But I just want to talk about real quick, not spend a lot of time because I'm sure there's a whole lot that happened in this episode, and I'm sure you guys are going to cover a bunch of it, but I wanted to talk about Detective Michner for a minute, because I realized this episode, what I hadn't brought up before, is that he really is good at being a cop. He's been a cop for many years, and he really knows how to work the system. Even that system from that many years ago, he knows kind of how to work it. And when he's talking to Diego and telling him about when he goes to San Quentin and all that kind of stuff, it really reminded me, if you ever watched The Closer or Major Crimes, there's a character, Lieutenant Provenza, who's the same kind of way. He's this older, more experienced cop who, whenever they need to know kind of how to work the system, that's the guy they go to. So I really appreciate Michner's or Nathan Lane's portrayal of Michner in this. I love that we knew in the last episode that he could tell that Tiago was lying to him about something. And then in this episode, as we see him questioning Diego, and then he even kind of questions Tiago there in the hallway and pieces together that it was Detective Vega's brother who did the killing. And so I just really like this character. I like the way Nathan Lane is portraying him, and just wanted to appreciate that for a couple of minutes. So can't wait to hear what you guys thought of this one. Talk to you later. Okay, episode 6, not episode 7. Got my numbers out of whack this week.
You know, I know why you've done that, Steve. It's very difficult. Steve sent in feedback to a number of other shows, where we are some of the lucky ones that get feedback from Steve every week. So I can only imagine, especially as well, doing his own podcast, I'm sure, getting mixed up on numbers for episodes must be very, very tough. So well done, Steve, for keeping it together and at least naming it correctly for me, so I knew which episode to play it for as well.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think Louis Michner, he is good at being a cop. You can really sense that he hustles and he uses his brain to do what he needs to do. He understands the ecosystem that he's in that precinct.
Absolutely. And I even love that moment where he says to Diego, I was just telling, or when he says to Tiago when he comes back in, he says, I've been talking to this guy, Diego, saying I've done this many, many times over the years. I've been here a long time, maybe too long, is what he's saying, because he's seen it all and it's not all good in there as well. So I really like that little moment from
absolutely.
From
yeah. Thank you, Steve, so much. And of course, big thanks to Ronaldo for the feedback. But speaking of Ronaldo, I think we have some more feedback through, this time on episode 6. Ronaldo says, I've just watched it and my gosh, what a tension-filled emotional chapter. Understandably, all the other threads of Molly and Adelaide and Peter and Mrs. Kraft seem to take a backseat to the interrogation of Diego by Vega and Michner. The tension is built around Diego knowing the fourth gang member is Mateo and holding that over the ever-nervous Tiago. I have to give props to Adan Rocha for his portrayal of Diego. The full spectrum of whimpering fool to manipulative criminal is seen here, and for me, he more than ably supports the episode. The relationship between Vega and Michner is strained, but I'm glad Tiago finally tells Louis. What I didn't expect was for Louis to then weave in the Hazlitt case and pin it on Diego. Nathan Lane again shows great acting here, and Michner and Vega's faces at the end tell the whole story. Other scenes of note for me, the utterly heartbreaking scene of Mateo rejecting his mama. He certainly has fallen down deep into a black hole, and the brief confrontation of Mrs. and Dr. Kraft again shows how tenuous a hold anyone seems to have during this episode. Just as the power play goes back and forth between Vega and Diego, so too does it with Dr. Peter and Mrs. Kraft. Incidentally, the plans Peter has for his wife are so callous and calculating, I think even he was surprised at how cruel he could be. I enjoyed this episode, but I'll put in just one quibble from the writing of Logan and Wilhelm. The writing seems to be just a little top-heavy with lengthy monologues. Kurt gets to give his origin and onset of joining the Gestapo. Townsend then follows that with a cute story about why he loves LA. Tiago gets to shine, opening up the interrogation. Diego talks of mud hens, and then Michner tells Diego of growing up in a different time, yet how the class difference is always there. Great fun for the actors, but for me, it started becoming quite apparent. Anyway, I'd give this 3.5 out of 5 bullets in the chamber sitting in the gents. Yes, well, maybe you don't want to shoot too much in the gents. At this point, I'm mostly invested in the Vega family, hoping the other threads can bring more to the series very soon. Ronaldo. Thanks so much, Ronaldo. Yeah, definitely. I think agree with you around Adan, Rocha, for sure. I thought he really helped. That trio, it was really just fantastic. Everything that they were doing. And, I like I don't know. I wonder whether, Dr. Kraft was surprised by how cruel he could be because of this dark secret. I'm just wondering, maybe it's not something that is new to him. So it's an interesting one. It's certainly callous and calculating, definitely, and that's what makes it so despicable. I
didn't pick that up. I felt like he'd been rehearsing the speech almost, so that he could negate anything that Linda, any objection that she might have had. He already had a plan in place for her, and if she makes a fuss, she won't see the kids, and this is what I'm doing, this is what I've got on you, kind of thing. And then when she has the audacity to not know the name of his harlot, he instantly corrects her. So I'm not sure whether he felt that he was going over the top, or he was frightened by how far he was going. I felt like it was quite planned, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
I see where Ray is going with the monologue piece, but actually I don't think this is on Logan and Wilhelm. I feel this is probably the editing.
Right.
I feel this was they could decided, well, you know what, we can stick in the Townsend and Kurt story here, rather than making it Tiago heavy and Diego heavy. Yeah. Because if it was just 3, like 3's grand, but when you go 5 monologues, I can see where Ray is coming from. Yeah. It's just, it feels like an editing decision.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, I like the monologue of the Mud Hens and Michner. I think that's really important to how Michner kind of operates. And I suppose it's one of the ways of finding out about some of the people, certainly with the Kurt and Townsend aspect, for sure. I like the Mud Hens and the Michner class difference thing. I thought that was really important to how he kind of set it up, and I liked it. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Ray.
Yes, thank you so much, Ray, for your feedback. Don't forget, we'd love to hear from all of you. You can all go over to our group at TV Podcast Industries over on Facebook. So facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries, and leave your thoughts for each episode in the post-marked spoiler post for this episode.
Absolutely. And while you're over there, since I still after 7 seasons haven't had the opportunity to do a podcast about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I've started a thread weekly for a spoiler post for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. season 7, which started last week. So look, at least if I don't get to talk about it in the podcast, hopefully I can talk to our lovely listeners about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in our little group there.
But keep it there. This is an AOS free zone. Yeah. No, but I actually did love the opening.
It was
it was really good. Yeah.
And set in 30s America as well. How weird is that?
But that is enough of AOS. It's an AOS free zone. But if you'd like to discuss AOS, go over to facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries and jump in and discuss it with us each and every week as it airs.
Well, me.
You can also send in, I'll throw some thoughts in there. Excellent. You can also email us your thoughts to feedback@tvpodcastindustry.com, or if you really want to, you can leave us a voicemail by going over to the website, tvpodcastindustry.com, or if you need to, just record it on your phone and send it to feedback@tvpodcastindustry.com. Gentlemen, I do believe it's time to head to the pub.
Yeah, it's about like 27 degrees in our podcast room here. Yeah. I am dying for a drink. Let's get on to the pub quiz.
Well, sadly, it's not a very cooling drink that I'm offering in the pub this week. It's been a long night, and of course, it's going to be an even longer day. So grab a hip flask of whiskey for this week's pub quiz. Yes. Remember, fellow Dreadfuls and Penny Faithful, to send in your answer to the questions for each episode of the City of Angels pub quiz, just send it in to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. You can send them in one at a time as the episodes fly by, or put them all down right at the end and send them in. But make sure to get them in just before our wrap up episode for Penny Dreadful City of Angels. But to this week's question, what soda does Diego ask for while being interrogated by Luis and Tiago?
Ooh, very good. He mentions that a few times actually in the episode.
Yes. What soda does Diego ask for while being interrogated by Luis and Tiago?
I'd certainly like one of these right now.
Yes.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I'm kind of like, oh, yes. I'm like, very soon I'm going to start panting like a dog just to keep myself temperature regulating.
Well, as long as you don't give away the name of the soda, you're allowed to do that, Chris.
I've never heard of this soda.
Okay. Well,
there we go.
Excellent.
Oh, I have.
It's probably
very American.
Probably an American LA type soda. If you want to have all of the questions for the pub quiz available to you easily, let's say, pop on over to the website, tvpodcastindustries.com, and you'll find a listing of all of the questions. No major hints, just a few images from each of the episodes about roughly where they may appear. But that will make it a little bit easier if you've missed some of them on our extensive discussions about Penny Dreadful City of Angels.
But, of course, you do not want to make things easy for yourself, so make sure you go over to subscribe at TV Podcast Industries and go back and listen to each and every episode on this season. And at the end, we always have the pub quiz. Just make sure you give it a download, give it a like, subscribe to the feed, and share the podcast, because sharing the podcast is sharing the love. We are also over on patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, and we would love your patronage in Patreon. So subscribe to us there for just even a simple $1 and you'll get some fantastic Patreon only content. And gentlemen, do you want to tell them what's coming very soon?
Yes, we have announced it before, but I'll announce it again. We will be covering Captain America Winter Soldier as an exclusive Patreon-only movie review available to everybody over on Patreon. They voted on that. You all voted on it last month and gave us the idea to do a movie because we haven't done Marvel in so long, and it seems like it's going to be, I don't know when Black Widow's coming at some point this year, but it looks like we won't be doing very much Marvel this year. We thought we'd be doing loads, but a little movie hopefully will, one of our favourites I think, will hold us over until the next time we do Marvel.
Yes, I recently reread Ed Brubaker's original Captain America Winter Soldier, and it still holds up even today.
Really
Brubaker is a legend.
Totally.
Yeah,
definitely.
He really is.
Yeah.
But gentlemen, I think that's about time we head off into the dark, much like Mama Vega, and just walk and shamble towards the camera with the darkness behind us.
Absolutely, yes. We'll be back next week with Penny Dreadful City of Angels, Episode 7, Maria and the Beast.
Oh, sounds good.
Beauty and the Beast.
I have a feeling that if you were looking for a supernatural episode of Penny Dreadful City of Angels, Maria Vega meeting the Beast may be what's coming in Episode 7.
Sounds pretty awesome.
Excellent. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll talk to you again next time.
Thank you so much. Goodbye. So long, and see you next episode.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, fellow Dreadfuls, for joining us, and fellow Mudhens. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep playing dead.
And keep sweating. Oh, it's summertime.
Yeah. Keep drinking ice cold drinks.
And keep safe, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. Bye.
Stay safe, guys.
Yeah. Stay safe. Bye.